Hello and welcome to the November In-Learning Partnership event, National STEM Day, a collaboration between Keep Indiana Learning, the Indiana Learning Lab, and powered by 5-Star and the Indiana Department of Education. My name is Alicia Ford, Digital Learning Specialist for the Indiana Department of Education's Digital Learning Team, and I am excited today to be wrapping up our event. A few reminders before we jump in to Dana Calfee's STEM integration across content areas with a specific focus on STEM and ELA. If you would like to receive PGP points for viewing today's session, stick around at the end and a 5-Star representative will be back to provide you with a code to redeem in the Learning Lab. Also, if you missed any of our previous sessions, please make sure to look on for the on-demand sessions in the Learning Lab to view the 10th anniversary of Hour of Code, Indiana STEM cadres, and Forging Our Future to look at how we can align education with workforce needs. Thank you again for being a part of this In-Learning Partner event today, and we hope that you enjoyed the sessions.
It is time for PDRL, Professional Development Request Live. Each Wednesday in the month of November, join us for sessions focused on topics selected by you, the Learning Lab users. Sign up in the Learning Lab. So welcome everybody to today's session. We are excited to kick off a special month of PD with IDOE. We are calling it PDRL, Professional Development Request Live. I'll be your co-host today, and my name is not Carson Daly, but I am Matt White, and I am here with my co-worker, co-host, Alicia Ford.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Matt. That's right. PDRL kicks off today. And if you've attended any of our live sessions for PD with IDOE in the past, you might have noticed that you receive an email asking for your feedback on the session after you view it. And I always wonder personally, like, what happens to this feedback that is collected? What do we do with it? And in this case, Matt and I have dug into those feedback forms, and we've made a list of all of the user requests so that all November sessions are pulled from what you as our viewers want to see. So hence the name PDRL.
So one of those feedback forms was hoping to learn more about how STEM can integrate with English language arts. So to tackle this topic today, we have a special guest. We can welcome our STEM and computer science specialist, Dana Calfee. Dana, how are you today? Dana, you're on mute right now.
Thanks. Sorry about that, Matt. I'm doing really great. I appreciate you all being here today. And I love it that you're paying such close attention to the needs and wants of folks who are using the Learning Lab. So I am also really glad to be able to talk about this topic today, because when I reflect on my time as a former science and computer science teacher, I am so thankful to have been surrounded by such outstanding educators who make me think about engagement and accessibility when we're talking about STEM. And so two of the most influential colleagues that I taught with taught ELA, and I distinctly remember conversations where both of these wonderful people would claim to know very little about STEM because they were from the non-STEM discipline. And because I think STEM is everywhere, I countered, of course you know about STEM. STEM and English language arts go hand in hand. So if I fast forward to now, when I'm asked to do this presentation on STEM integration, and I am both excited to be here with you to talk about possibilities, and yet a little nervous because of the amount of respect I have for my English language arts former colleagues and the tremendous effort required to teach English language arts, let alone integrate STEM. So with that being said, welcome. I am Dana Calfee, and I'm the STEM and Computer Science Specialist at IDOE. And I hope that today we can begin to scratch the surface to address what STEM integration means and discover connections to English language arts. Alicia, I think now you're on mute.
I mean, what is with us today, right?
I don't know.
Well, I was thinking in leading up to this presentation and kind of getting excited about it, that like thinking back, remembering times in school, kind of when our teachers might have explicitly called out points in lessons where they were teaching and saying, you know, we're doing math or we're doing science in the same lesson, and kind of showing that integration, or phrases like, this is how scientists think, or this is where math helps us, were kind of common, you know? So Dana, as you're getting into this, can you kind of help us think about the movement from identifying STEM practices to really incorporating and now integrating STEM?
Sure, I can. And I think the first thing is just kind of getting some basic definitions and basic thinking about sort of the continuum of how we think about STEM. So we're all pretty familiar with the definition here, STEM, including those 4 disciplines: science, technology, engineering, and math. And then kind of the idea that maybe there should be an interdisciplinary approach, or there should be some kind of a crossover approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you fast forward and you think about the work that was done in 2021 by the Indiana Department of Education and surrounding the Indiana's priorities for STEM education, this is the definition that we're working on as we roll out initiatives and think about program alignment. So we've gone from just STEM as some isolated disciplines to more of an integrated definition of STEM education in general. So we're thinking about, how do science, technology, engineering, and math relate to a student-centered curriculum where students are integrating these ideas in the work that they do in school. So it's definitely there's definitely growth on a continuum there, but added to that then is sort of the research and the work that's being done to talk about different levels of STEM. So again, there's just several definitions of STEM on this continuum, and we can think about STEM as that intradisciplinary, more of a silo approach. So maybe the math and the science teacher are talking about a similar topic, but in their own classrooms and separate from each other. And then in the middle, there's that integrated STEM approach where maybe there's a little bit more of a crossover, more of an interdisciplinary or a multidisciplinary approach. So maybe the math and science teacher are talking about the same topic, but they're doing something joint together. And then there's integrative STEM, which is the goal of transdisciplinary STEM, where knowledge connections are made as a result of students identifying and solving real world problems, and the lines are kind of blurred between the different disciplines, and yet students are learning what they need to learn across the board. So that's kind of that's a broad range of definitions.
So Dana, it's really great to hear, the different ways to think about, how STEM and, the different definitions and just, lots of great information. Dana's going to be back with us here in just a minute on PDRL, but we first have a little commercial break.
STEM, STEAM, STREAM, STEM plus C. Yikes. Are you familiar with the many acronyms when it comes to STEM? Or what about what it actually looks like in your classrooms? Is it intra, inter, multi, or transdisciplinary? It can easily become overwhelming when thinking of where to start with integrating STEM into any content, area, or grade level. So if you're looking for a great place to start, check out the on-demand session in the Learning Lab led by Ball State University professors Dr. Gisa and Dr. Stith. By incorporating their extensive research and knowledge about integrative STEM education, they break down the ins and outs of teaching outside of silos and making STEM education accessible to all students. It's a great follow-up to today's session.
So if you are interested in that session, Alicia is dropping a link for that in the chat. And for those of you who are watching on demand, that link is available in the description below. So Dana, in the first half of your session, like we talked about, it was really great to hear you demonstrating the different ways that we can think about STEM. So, when we think about the importance of moving along that continuum from accelerating an awareness of STEM to really integrating STEM across disciplines, why is that so important?
Well, I think that part of the reason why it's so important is because it's sort of the direction that we're moving in terms of society and technology and the advancement of technology in the workforce. And so when we think about certain skills or certain things we want to try to see students do in the area of STEM, it kind of translates across into other areas of society as well. And so on the left, you see a list of outcomes, goals, or guiding principles that contributed to the development of Indiana's priorities for STEM education. So things like investigation and modeling, collaboration, communication, productive struggle, those are all things that are outlined and identified in the priorities as being things that sort of ignite the ability for students to learn and self-advocate. And so that's from our Indiana STEM priorities. Then if you look at the right-hand side of the slide, a recent study completed by Inspire Success identified 8 key skills and traits essential to success after high school. And you can see the direct alignment of 5 of those essential skills to goals and outcomes of implementation of Indiana STEM priorities. Additionally, one could argue the remaining 3 essential skills from this research, integrity, growth mindset, and information, digital, and financial literacy, they loosely align at key benchmarks in integrated STEM education. So these key skills and traits that are identified as essential for post-secondary success are developed throughout a student's entire K-12 education. So with direct overlap between 5 of these key traits and the guiding principles from the STEM priorities, it seems like an extraordinary opportunity to work more efficiently to prepare students for success if we can develop some strategies and opportunities for STEM integration across the disciplines.
I love this idea that you're speaking to, Dana, of working efficiently. That really stands out when you place this whole question of, integrated STEM in the context of teaching in a post-pandemic world, which, we're all doing. So along with that, implementing Indiana's priorities for STEM education and considering the key traits and skills for post-secondary success that you outlined on that previous slide, learning recovery has certainly been a concern for educators as well. And if there are opportunities where we can, use that integrated approach to kind of layer in more opportunities for students to build back those skills, it seems like this is a worthwhile conversation. What are some ways, Dana, that you think about English language arts in STEM?
So certainly, I'm glad you mentioned learning recovery. We know that Indiana educators wear many hats and have multiple data points to consider when designing instruction. So while outside the scope of this presentation, it's certainly worth mentioning that Indiana is implementing a literacy coaching model focused on science of reading instruction to those early grades. IDOE has also released SENS guidance on those are standards in essential need of support, and that can also help teachers as well. And when you start to dig into those standards in essential need of support, you can start to see some of the overlap, some of these areas of overlap that I'm getting ready to talk about with STEM. So when we think about the whole child and we seek yet another layer of support to help students build capacity for those key traits and skills, we have to consider engagement. And so when students do not see themselves as a reader or a writer or a speaker, it can present a challenge in the classroom. So that's where STEM kind of comes in. So let's think about that a little bit. So in this very simplistic view of the English language arts standards, we can see they're broken down into 4 categories: reading, writing, speaking and listening, and media literacy. In speaking with a few English language arts teachers in the field while preparing for this presentation, we brainstormed some ideas and just some of the key areas of development within each category that could potentially have connections to STEM. For example, in the reading category of standards, students identify key ideas from text, synthesize them, and then make connections to other ideas. Capacity to perform these tasks grows as students move through grade levels. So in writing, among other things, students work on the writing process and the research process. And processes are really important in STEM. Discussion, collaboration, and presenting knowledge and ideas are things you find students doing while mastering the speaking and listening standards. And developing analysis skills and the ability to interpret the influence of media are key skills as well. So this is I'd like to just invite the group to have a little bit of participation here. And so if you would be willing to, this would be great. It's kind of a two-step activity. So you can come off mute or throw your responses in the chat. But the first question to consider is, I want you to think back to when you were in English class in your favorite year of K-12 school. What was the favorite thing you learned while either reading, writing, speaking and listening, or engaging with media? So I'll give you a second to think about that, and then you can go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat. Connections in poetry, reading contemporary literature, figuring out claims and how they were supported in commercials. Okay, dorky, but I love paraphrasing research. Love that so much. Dramatic literature. All right, so that's your favorite thing that you learned. So when you were learning those things in your English language arts class, what were you doing? What was the action that you as a student, what were you doing in order to learn those things? Performing the text, discussion, analysis, comprehension skills, analyzing and interpreting, writing with support. Excellent. Okay, so I think just based on this limited discussion that we're having right now, you can begin to see that some of the things you're describing as things that you're making connections to the current world, right? Some of the things that you're describing that you did in your English language arts class, learning the things that you loved and remember the most, are actual things that you do when you are engaging in STEM. So if we can begin to connect the dots between what we're as an English language arts teacher, and this is what I'm being told from my colleagues and from the folks in the field that I surveyed just to talk about this and scratch the surface today. If we begin to really get from the perspective of an English language arts teacher, when I'm analyzing text, I'm interpreting information, I'm building an argument, and I have the potential to be able to do that. And I'm participating in discussions, and I'm processing what's the best way to make my argument and to provide the evidence that's needed to make my claim. And so all of those things are things that happen in a STEM class, in a STEM setting. So, so let's just sort of keep that in mind.
All right, so similar to the exercise in identifying those key goals or skills within the English language arts standards, we can do the same across STEM disciplines. So I'm going to pause for a minute and we're going to digest the information on the screen. But while you're scanning and processing, I want you to think about reading, writing, speaking, and listening from the previous slide. And so what you're looking at here is sort of the process standards and the practices that are used in STEM. So we have those 21st century problem solving skills on the left, along with engineering and technology, design processes, and student practices in the engineering space. And then on the right-hand side, we have the science and engineering practices from the science perspective. And then through the lens of math, we have those math processing standards. So where are you seeing, as you're processing here, where are you seeing those opportunities for reading, writing, speaking, and listening? So we'll just pause for a moment and let you take that in. And then there's computer science. So compare these core practices in the previous examples from across the traditional STEM disciplines to computer science. So I always like to say that CS is the T in STEM, and I want us to think about adding these core practices to what we considered on the previous slide, and now think about that crossover from ELA, identifying key ideas from text and synthesizing information to make connections, or following a research or writing process. So I know that Alicia has a link to share. I think has already shared it in the chat for another Learning Lab session on computer science and STEM. But right now, where do you see, so if you think about all of the practices that are involved in those STEM classrooms, where are some of the potential crossovers to truly integrate English language arts and STEM? What do you all think? I think there are lots of connections with building arguments and using evidence. Yes, I agree with you on that. Collaboration, 100%. Sequencing, what a great thing to call out there. You know, there's so much sequencing that's involved in developing and using abstractions in the computer science space, but that same thought process is articulated very well. I mean, the reason that we sequence things is extremely important in math and also engineering and also in the writing process for English language arts. So I love it that that was called out. Storytelling and writing processes can be tied to coding. Absolutely. How wonderful is it to create a narrative with using block coding and seeing the scene of your narrative right on the screen, and with small tweaks to the code, you can change the picture based on feedback from your peers. It's an outstanding way to be able to collaborate and communicate with peers using something that's engaging, like storytelling and coding. Very nice. Creativity and problem solving, definitely. There's some definite overlap with the need for creativity, but also just figuring out how to look. Part of being creative is being able to apply different lenses and different approaches that are often very powerful in an English language arts classroom. So remember, there's the interdisciplinary or intradisciplinary model where students may learn about natural resources and conservation in science, understand scale and magnitude of numbers associated with natural resources in a math class, and then read an information text on natural resources in English language arts when they're learning about main ideas. So these lessons are about the same topic, but potentially happen with little coordination or connection to each other. Is this STEM? Sure. We have to establish somehow, somewhere, that there's a connection in these processes. But if we move on that same continuum that we discussed earlier, in the multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary approach, in the middle, maybe the school has a theme or a focus on conservation, and perhaps students engage in a design challenge to build a model tiny home that one might survive in various settings impacted by the lack of conservation. So in this scenario, maybe students read science fiction along with information text to make an argument for what the conditions in the book setting might have been like. And then if the ELA teacher and the engineering and math and science teacher collaborate to set up a system where students can design their model and receive feedback from other students who have read the book before, using details from research to actually build out the models, that would be kind of an integrated approach. And if we wanted to move back to more of an integrative, a little further on the continuum to a more integrative STEM and ELA approach, in that transdisciplinary approach where the lines between the disciplines are a little bit more blurred, an example might look something like this. So students might be learning, if we're sticking with the theme of conservation, perhaps they embark on a campaign to make or coordinate zero waste efforts at the district level by maybe engaging community partners for assistance, maybe writing letters, making phone calls, sending emails, but getting community partners to the table to have and leading discussions about how this could become possible. And so in this example, and I'll throw this out to the group, but in that example, if launching a real district initiative to coordinate zero waste efforts, how might science, technology, engineering, math, and language arts, and even social studies, how might some integration, how might student learning sort of transcend learning in silos and interconnect that knowledge to bring about a solution? What do you guys think? What are your thoughts? So many ideas. I know there's so many ways to think about it. Students might be doing a lot of writing in a project like that. When I think about something like this, I think about, well, who do they have to convince to make that happen at the district level? Do they have to talk to other adults? Do they have to present to a school board? Who do they have to talk to get that permission? And then when you think about zero waste, what levels of impact are there? Is that just the cafeteria and the classroom? Is it the whole school? Who are the stakeholders and how do they go through the process of identifying that? I also see research skills and nonfiction reading definitely would have to become part of the whole process of solving the problem of creating zero waste systems. So I think when you start breaking apart your ideas, and this is what my English language arts colleagues have said, they're like, this is just super great. Where the breakdown happens is trying to figure out if we're doing it right, if we are connecting to the right practices, and what if we can't start that big. So I do think it's important to remember that all of STEM integration does exist on a continuum, and that the only way to really get going with it is just to pick a small chunk to get started with, and then let it build from there. So if we reflect back to the beginning of this presentation on the overlap between STEM, those essential post-secondary skills, and key skill development in the ELA classroom, the closing thought I'm left with is that all kids approach learning from different perspectives that are shaped by their personal experiences and their unique makeup. So when I taught middle school science, my goal is to design as many access points as possible to accommodate my student population. When students walk into a science classroom with a love of science fiction characters and reading a great book, that's an access point that we have to figure out how to leverage in order to expand the love of reading, but also to engage in science, engage in technology, engineering, and math. And when students they show up in English class for the dreaded writing process because they would much rather be in the STEM lab following an algorithmic process to program a robot, that's an access point. So an integrative approach to including STEM in the ELA classroom and ELA across the STEM disciplines, either separately or simultaneously. It provides opportunities for students to have an emotional reaction to the learning that is critical. It's a critical starting point for building capacity for lifelong problem solving and collaborating and communicating in our dynamic high-tech world. So I appreciate you all being here and participating in the conversation today.
Hello, everyone. We hope you have enjoyed today's session. My name is Nate. I work on the team that brings you the Indiana Learning Lab, and I wanted to talk you through how you can redeem your professional growth hours for attending today's workshop. The code that is on your screen is what you're going to need in order to get your professional growth hours. So that code is STEM ELA, all one word, STEM ELA. You're going to need to write that down, and you're going to enter that code into the Indiana Learning Lab. So to do that, you log into your Indiana Learning Lab account. You select Learning from the main navigation bar at the top, then Live. Then you select the button that says Redeem Learning Code. You will enter STEM ELA into the box provided there, and that's going to earn you your professional growth hours. If you need any help during that process, you can always use the live chat feature in the lab to talk to one of our team members that can coach you through that. Thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you at a future workshop.